Okay, our final speaker of the day is an Emmy Award-winning designer, the CEO and chief strategist at Blind, and the founder of The Futur, an online education platform that teaches the business of design to creatives. He's a huge advocate for lifelong learning and has lectured at institutions like San Diego University, Rise Up Summit Cairo, and the Art Center College of Design. He's given talks and conducted workshops on negotiations, pricing, budgeting, leadership mindset, social media marketing, client relations, and so much more. Please welcome Chris Do, everyone. Hey, Chris.
What is up, Justin? Hello, everybody. Hello.
It's really good to see you, man. I'm excited. It's like getting to chat with the Oracle. So it's a little intimidating because I know there's a lot of advice that you've given and can give, and we're going to get to a lot of that. But I feel like, with the topic that we have at hand here, let's set the stage with a big question first. And it may take you a bit to answer this one. So How do you find the work that you love to do, and how is the Japanese concept of ikigai related to that? That's all. Easy.
That's just really easy. Well, I'm going to start this off with a little story if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm at NAB in Las Vegas. I'm meeting up with a former student of mine who has been running his company for a number of years, quite successful in his own right. And I'm walking into this restaurant in Las Vegas, and he sees me, and I'm like smiling from ear to ear. And he goes, "Chris, I know you're a happy guy, but you look especially happy right now. Like, what's going on with you?" So I slide over onto the table, and I'm like, "Hey, you have a napkin or something we can draw on? I just want to show you something." So I draw in front of him 3 circles. The first circle is like this idea of like what we do that we're good at. The second one is like what we get paid to do. And the last one is the thing that we love. And I said, I've struggled with these concepts, and I didn't realize it until now that it's all coming together. It's taken a number of years to get here, but I'm here now. And to expand a little bit further, when I was running Blind, making commercials and music videos, I felt really fulfilled for a while. But if you make one commercial for Nike, for Xbox, and you think your life is going to change and it doesn't, and you keep chasing that and chasing it, and it's just more work for like high profile clients, but it doesn't change. Yeah, and you make money, but sometimes you have to deal with some really tough clients. And after a while, like I'm feeling like I'm just showing up. On the other side, I was teaching this whole time at Art Center, at Otis, and a couple other schools. Super fulfilling work for me. Like it enriches my soul. I feel when I'm done teaching, I'm just so happy and content. But the problem is I look at my paycheck and it's like, that's it? That's all I got for this? And you know what it's like.
Yeah.
We do it because we love it, not because of the money, or so we tell ourselves that. And so my 2 worlds were at oppositions with each other because I would rather just teach all the time, but I can't feed myself by doing that. And it wasn't until I started doing things with the Futur that I got to embrace the teacher in me to help other people, which is very fulfilling, and to build a business model around that and incorporate other concepts like video production, entrepreneurship, negotiations, and all those kinds of things that I truly found myself. And this is very much in parallel with the ikigai concept, which I know gets butchered a lot, and I'm guilty of some of this, so I don't want to pretend like I understand the deeper Japanese concept, but it's your reason for being. Like whatever it is that you do that fulfills you, that gives you joy, that you do forever. Like it's a Japanese concept, right? Which I love, which is deeply rooted in their culture, in this idea that there is nobility in doing humble things well. So when you go to a fast food cafe, even the person who's cleaning a table does it with a degree of enthusiasm, and they want to be good at that. And they'll do that and perfect that all their life. That's it. And so this is what I want to share with people, that perhaps you've been doing things because they've paid you well, and perhaps you've done things that you feel like is your calling, but to find that overlap, that's the ikigai concept, I think.
And that's a creative act, isn't it? You have to look at these 2 things, especially if they don't have any apparent overlap, right? And so is that something that you feel, well, when you realize, okay, these are the 2 things and I want to bridge them, or the 3 things, I want to bring them together, is that a good time to reach out and try to get help? I mean, it seems like that's a hard thing to do on your own, because if you were able to do it on your own, you probably would have already done it, right? Is that a fair assumption? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a creative act, and you're right putting your finger on that, because I think it's very difficult for us to know what we're good at. Mark Manson writes in his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving Enough. He says that we traditionally are the worst people to evaluate our own value. Like, we don't know what we're worth. We don't really know what we're good at. And the reason why is, like, we do creative work and we're waiting for clients to tell us, like, we love this. Oh, what an amazing concept. We'd like to award the job to you. And then we feel fulfilled. And so we're not really good at figuring out what we're good at. So sometimes it takes an outsider, sometimes a friend, a parent, a mentor, a coach, or a complete stranger to say, you're a remarkable singer. And that's when you're like, am I really? Or I love your voice. Or I just love the way that you say things. And you're like, wow, okay. But then you have to bring those concepts together. Now, both of us have worked in the motion industry for like 2 decades, right? When you're trying to come up with a concept, you're trying to find that thread between 2 or more disparate things. And when you do so, you create this new hybrid thing. And it's not any different with your life and your career. You have to find that thread, and it's not an easy thing to do.
Okay. You mentioned something that I wanted to talk to you about, and you were saying it in more of kind of almost like a psychological sense, which was this idea of know your value. Like, what is it that you kind of bring to the world? But then there's also that phrase gets used so much in a kind of financial context, right? Which is know your value. I've heard this is something you could tell freelancers, staffers, studio owners, everybody who works in creative services. What I agree, you do need to know your value, but how the hell do you find your value? How do you figure that out, right? Like, and I know that's not a simple question, but how do you begin to figure out what your value is?
I guess I should not expect any less from you. Only super difficult, life-changing questions.
right off the bat here, man.
On a Monday, whatever. There's no warm-up with you, huh? Okay, I get it.
Guess not. Sorry, man. No foreplay. We're going right to it.
Oh, good. Yeah. Buy me dinner first, will you? Okay. I'm going to answer that question in 2 ways. If you're a freelancer, meaning you're booked by the day or by the hour, by the week or something, and you're working for a company as a subcontractor, the market determines your value. So unfortunately, wherever the company exists, so if the company who's hiring you is in LA, New York, or San Francisco, their market allows them to charge a certain amount of money, and then therefore they can pay freelancers quite a bit of money, theoretically. So it's some combination of what they can afford and your skill level, and the perception of how unique you are determines your market value. The easiest thing for you to do is periodically raise your rates, and to not stay at one shop for too long. Like, do a good job at one company, and then when you switch companies, bump up your rate by $50 a day. Okay. Just push it up a little bit and just keep doing that until you feel the resistance. And that doesn't mean you found your theoretical limit. It just means you're getting close to it, and continue to work on your skills. What I would suggest that you do is you publish your work as often as you can on social media, on all the different platforms. Try to get featured in magazines. So as your profile goes up, so does your credibility. Social proof is there. I was just featured in XYZ named top 30 under 30 creatives from this magazine or that publication. These are good things for you to help you command more money. But the best way for you to raise your rates is to provide something that few other people can, which is becoming increasingly difficult.
Yeah, so that's answer number 1. That's true. We're gonna okay, go on.
So
you
answer
have
number 2
part of the answer. Yeah.
Right. Is if you're an independent business owner, if you are working independently remotely, where you have the ability to work more directly with clients and you can hire freelancers and other people, this is now a whole different way of finding your value. So this is where it's a complete, like we were talking about hockey, now we're going to talk about baking. 2 totally different concepts, right? So you need to purge. So take the little bit of ginger to cleanse the palate, because it's a whole different concept.
Okay.
All right. So you need to learn how to communicate value, not necessarily your value, just value. And stick with me on this, okay? Value, which is the client arrives to you with a problem, and they need this problem solved, and they already know before contacting you that only by spending money can they make their problem go away. In fact, you can argue you don't have a problem if you can spend money to make it go away. So they arrive with a problem in hand. Your job through conversation is to find out the size of the problem and how much pain it's causing them, because the bigger the problem, the more they're going to spend on it. So for example, there are little things, odds and ends around the house. So like if I have a leaky faucet, it's annoying to me Maybe if I'm really conscientious about water conservation, I need that problem fixed, but generally speaking, it's not going to change my life. But if I have a leaky roof, on the other hand, and a storm is coming, that's going to present to be a much bigger problem. So a contractor who could fix both the leaky faucet and the leaky roof, they're going to charge different things, even though they're the same person that potentially is spending the same amount of time to solve a problem, because the problem relative to the buyer of the service is going to be the person who determines it. This is why we should not enter the conversation by saying, I charge X an hour, because now we're totally disregarding the problem relative to the buyer. I hope that makes sense to everybody that's listening.
That's a great analogy that I'm going to use a lot. That's perfect.
All right.
I want to dive into a very specific idea that is people are excited about, because in New York, state of New York, I think, actually, it might already be in effect now. There's a law that when job postings are put online, that they have to have salary bands now published with them. And I'm wondering, to what degree does salary transparency help in knowing your value, or does it not help at all? Is it a distraction from something else? What do you think about that?
That's a 3 for 3 here. Okay.
I'm going to keep them coming, dude.
I know. Transparency and salary. It is a tricky thing. I'm trying to think about this from two perspectives, the perspective of the employer and the employee. I think when you post a job, you should tell people it's going to be between this and this, depending on your skill set. So there's a range. And generally speaking, behind the scenes, most large companies already have these. They have titles and the range of salary that you can be paid. So if you don't have that title, you can't make more than that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with publishing. Like, for example, if I'm going to hire an entry-level designer, I might say the salary is going to be between 45 to 60K. So you kind of know what the range is going to be. And so if you're going to apply, the minimum that you're going to make is 45, and probably the theoretical max is about 60K. And then it's an assessment about the individual skill, whatever X factor that you bring to it. Maybe you have a different degree that you add to the conversation, so it's not present in the portfolio or the body of the work. We have the flexibility to move that around. But salary transparency, knowing what John or Mary makes in the different department, I think there's going to be a couple different problems there. John and Mary have a right to privacy as well. And so by publishing their salaries, they may not be super comfortable with that. And it couldn't cut both ways. For example, John or Mary might be both overqualified for what they're being paid and feel kind of ashamed. And by publishing all of that, even though they love the work, now they're going to feel a sense of, I need to get more. I'm feeling more entitled. And now what I used to be happy doing, now I feel miserable about. The other problem is someone who's less qualified than them says, well, why aren't I being paid what John and Mary being paid? And people, to tie it back to the first question about value and all that stuff, we don't know. We just see numbers and we're like, they're human, they're doing a job, I'm a human, I'm doing the job, I should just make the same. When we both know, if you've ever hired creative people, there's a whole gamut of skill sets, ease of working, a work ethic. There's a lot of different things there. And I think individuals need to be evaluated individually, and some exceptions need to be made for those that are high performers.
Okay, I think that's a fair response. It's nuanced, and we'll see what happens, I suppose, with the job postings. If anything, I suppose with job postings, not with specific people, it'll be interesting to see how different companies put value on these ranges. And, I don't know what we're going to learn, but we'll find out, I suppose. I want to go back to freelancers because, I think a lot of people watching are freelancers, or maybe they have freelanced or they're considering freelancing. I didn't freelance for long. It's just not who I am. And part of it, though, is this realization that every freelancer hits at some point in their life. Maybe they're mid-career and they realize, okay, I can only raise my day rate so much. They do kind of what you were saying earlier, and they found that the ceiling, the tolerance is like whatever it is. If you're a developer, it could be quite high, but if you're a specific kind of designer, it might be a little lower, whatever. And then what they realize is they're really selling their time, and it has a very finite dollar amount to it. And yes, there's, inflation adjust for that, but they're never going to break out. They're never going to break through the ceiling, right? They're always going to be pressed against this salary ceiling because of the way that they are basically charging for their services, right? Now, I would imagine that the people who come to this realization are some of the people who come knocking on the door of the future, who are like, get me out. How do I break through the ceiling, right? Or how do I change the room? First of all, is that right? Are those a lot of the people that you deal with? And how do you help them figure out, like, get out of that, get their head not pressing against the glass above them?
Okay, so this is no secret. So anybody who wants to book me in the future, they're going to know this right now. I'm just going to say it. I am the employer's probably worst friend. I am the employee's best advocate, because mostly I tell people how to quit their job or how to get job insurance. Yeah. So if you're freelancing for someone, there is going to be a threshold, because the company takes the risk. They pay your salaries, and when times are not great, they're still paying you. They're burning money all the time. And because they take the risk, they should be afforded the reward, right? And you can only charge so much as an employee or as a freelancer, because you're not assuming any risk at all.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks, you're going to get a check. And if something happens to you, you're going to get like long-term leave. You're going to get insurance. Everything is covered. The only real way that you can make money, at least from the way I see it, is for you to do something on the side, and eventually that side thing becomes your main thing. Because right now you are quite literally selling time for money. Now, we have employees, so I hope our employees don't quit, but I don't manage my employees by measuring time or even output. I measure outcomes, and this is really important. So I'm not saying I've always done this, because this is a fairly new phenomenon for me as well. It used to be like, you got to show up, you got to go to work from, say, 10 to 7 p.m., and that's how we pay you. So if you're more productive than the next person, we don't really look at that.
Yeah.
Then we used to measure output, which is, if you make 10 storyboards, we'll pay you more. But you can make 10 crappy storyboards, and that's not going to help me win a job. So that doesn't matter to me either. And now what we do is we just say, each person sets their own metrics for success, meaning what department are you in? How will you measure success at the end of the quarter? And can you agree to this? And you set those benchmarks, and we help you set those benchmarks. Are they too high? Are they too low? Because some people get super ambitious and they're going to kill themselves. And some people, they're like, I don't know if I can do it. Let's just set it here. This feels fair. And then what they do is they measure their own progress towards those goals. So if it takes them 2 hours or 20 hours, that's entirely up to them. And so
that's
it's a different way of measuring things. Yeah. And that's how we would manage that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So in a way, I mean, to go back to getting out of the situation where you've kind of hit or you see the ceiling approaching, I heard a few things. And one is, kind of rethink how you are defining your own success. But the other thing is, you mentioned, finding something on the side and then making that, maybe it becomes your main thing. Now, let's talk a little bit about that, because there's two things I want to talk about there. My brother's a pilot, and he's a commercial pilot. He flies for United. And for a long time, he was a loan officer. His degree in school was marketing, and he shouldn't have ever done that, right? But he liked to fly. He would go for fun on the weekends. He taught himself. Didn't teach himself. He went to school for it and everything. And he finally was able to make the jump to being a professional pilot. And the first thing that I think he had to struggle with was this thing that gave me immeasurable joy, because it was an escape from my loan officer day-to-day job, is now my job. And it changes the character of it, right? You the thing that used to be kind of your pressure release valve or your extra money valve or whatever, when it becomes your full, your plate, your everything that you're kind of doing, it changes the character of it. Have you seen that happening? Like, how do you how do you prepare people for that, realization when they make, because I think a lot of people think it's going to be my side hustle. I'm going to switch, and then happily ever after, it's all over. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like your brother traded one job for a slightly better job.
Yeah, musical chairs.
What he likes to do, right?
Yeah,
but he still has a job. He still has a boss. He's still selling time for money. And if he does the best job as the best pilot in the world, his compensation is still tied to a title and a position in a company. What he lacks is autonomy, the ability to be self-directed, to be able to call the shots. He lacks the ability to have flexibility in his life and his schedule. So if he is called to fly, he has to fly. Otherwise, you miss too many of those work days, you get let go. And that's kind of natural. That's a professional standard. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if your brother were to save up enough money and to start to lease a smaller plane and fly people for things other than just commercial travel. There can be destination trips, and he could be a guide, and he could sell experiences and not just getting you from point A to point B. He could also say hire a couple other people to serve the best meals and give AAA service to whoever flies with him and starts to develop a brand. But I think we, like in the free world here, and I know that it's what is it? I'm privileged to be able to say this, is that we need to be the masters of our own destiny, to author the next chapter in the book of life. And this is really important to us so that we can manifest what it is that we're supposed to be doing. So I got a lot of joy teaching at Art Center at Otis. But when I taught for myself to my own students and I got to do it the way that I wanted to do, even though at the beginning I made a lot less, ultimately I'd figure out a way to teach better, more effectively to more people, and then I was making a lot more. Right? So let's put this in contrast just for people to think about this. So when I taught at Art Center, I hope it's okay for me to say this. Sorry, Art Center. I was paid I think at the height of it, like $60 an hour. $60 an hour. Let's just think about that for a little bit.
At Art Center,
so I taught,
check out the tuition at Art Center.
Right? And, I'm not some kid teaching. I run a company. Yeah. I've been teaching there at this point like 10, 15 years. It's not like my first gig here. And so I taught for 5 hours. So I made $300 to teach. It took me an hour and a half to drive there, an hour and a half to drive home. My whole day is gone. Yeah. So, Justin, you know this, entry-level creatives, $300 a day is not really a lot of money. I'm paying people $800, $1,200 a day. So it's like, this feels upside down. Then one day I decide I'm going to author my own typography course. I'm going to market, I'm going to sell it. I think originally it was $149 for one course. Not a ton of money. If you want to buy the course, it's $149. Eventually we raise the price. But currently, the course from the lifetime of selling this has exceeded $700,000. More than all of my 15 years combined teaching at both schools put together.
And it's probably more rewarding personally just to do that. Probably it's kind of a win across the board. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you know what's really cool? Only a few people can even think about, forget about applying, just even think about going to Art Center, which last time I checked was like $22,000 a semester. And so that means the barriers to entry, like you have to be able to afford a $250,000 education. You have to be able to get yourself to the United States, to live in California, one of the most expensive places to live, to even think about doing this. Furthermore, you have to attend 2 semesters before you even get to the typography course. So you're out now $44K just in tuition costs alone. So
just to do a typography course.
Just to do typography, just to learn to be a better designer, right? Right. So for me, being able to offer a course, it's $299 now, I think, or something like that, to some kid who's in Cairo, who's in Singapore, who's in Africa. I know it's still a lot of money for them, but relative to that other thing that we just talked about, it's nothing. So I get messages in my DM saying, I have a career because of you. I know how to design because of you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredibly rewarding. So we got, I feel like we got like this super tantalizing taste of what it is to work with you on these problems, because even you were talking about my brother and you were just spitballing and I was like, shit, I need to write this down and tell it to my brother. I want to move on. Yeah, that's right. Great. I need to move on to some other stuff, and then we're going to go to the audience. So this is a good time. If you're watching, in the chat, look to the left of the chat. There's a button that says ask a question, and I will jump over to those. It looks like we've only got like one in there right now. So ask some questions. And I'm going to keep going here. I've got a couple more. So clients. So I'm in a position now at Buck where I don't have to deal with clients, and I love it. But that's my problem. So there's an old saying that goes something like, I love design, I just hate the clients, or something like that, right? It's silly because you can't, without clients, it's kind of hard to make a living doing design. But the sentiment behind that, I think, is a common one. It's like, at worst, clients are the enemy. And at best, clients are just fuel for what you really want to do, or, your own ideas, whatever. Now, everything I just said, I'm pretty sure rubs you the wrong way. How do you get people to think about clients differently? Like, what's a healthier framework for that?
I think it's because a lot of creatives think of themselves as artists or artistes, however you want to say it. And we have this romantic vision of what an artist is. You're in your studio. In the old days, it would be canvas and paint. And today it's like NFTs and computers and supercomputers. And you just get to do whatever it is you want. And if you want to do that, you should do that. By all means, if you can afford to do that, and that's what's in your heart and your soul, as many artists before you have done, and just kind of grind it out for years in anonymity, making no money. And eventually you make some real money. Like Beeple was just on. He worked on a thing for 13 years.
Yeah, he was an overnight success after 13 years. Exactly.
Yeah, 13 years, 5,000 images later, he was able to cash in on that, and couldn't happen to a better person, right?
Yeah.
And so if you say like, now I'm a designer and I solve people's problems, which is typically how we understand this, you have a job to do. It's just like any job. And so you have to realize that in order for you to pay for diaper, for formula, and the rent for wherever you're living, you have to be able to service clients. So we're in the service business, and the people who deliver the best service are going to win this game. And we think that the product, the thing that you make, is the service. It's not, because you have to do good work to be able to get the job. And I've made this mistake. I was young and arrogant. Now I'm just old and arrogant. But when I was young and arrogant, I thought the gift is the product. Like, I'm going to do that. You should thank me later. I remember, I'm going to admit this. Year one in business, I was working with a former boss of mine who hired me to work on some work for Nike. So they flew in from out of town. I'm privileged enough to work on a Nike project a year out of school. I'm animating things, and they're going to go to dinner. And then they left, and I was feeling, oh, why didn't you invite me to dinner? When in fact, I should have been the one taking them to dinner in appreciation for the work. Do you see how messed up my head was? Yeah. And I share that as a moment of stupidity to share with all of everybody who's listening, is because we have this entitlement mindset that if I make this thing, then you owe me more than what you owe me. No, I owe you, and I'm trying to build a relationship.
Yeah.
And you have to think about that. So we have to.
That's a big paradigm shift. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that's helpful. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to, let's see, actually, Matt, are we into the audience Q&A portion right now? Kind of, okay. Let me ask one more question before we flip it over. Yeah. He's kind of, más o menos.
I read that. Yeah.
There's this thing we talk about a lot at Buck, and I think it's at every studio, every freelancer, every creative struggles with burnout, right? And God, especially the last 2 years. It's very tempting when talking about burnout to blame it on external factors. And I'm not saying they're not factors, but things like, client demands and late changes and poor project management, et cetera. Those do contribute to burnout. But, and this is probably not very popular to say, but I do think that the driving factor for burnout is often the creatives themselves, right? When you are trying to make every project you do the best project you've ever done, burnout. You cannot, you can't always do that. You can't always kind of put the same level of energy in. So in the worst case scenario, and I'm sure we know tons of people who've done this, people quit the industry entirely. They quit creative services because they feel that burnout is endemic. It's inevitable. It's part of working. You just can't get around it. You've been doing this long enough that I'm sure you've had to deal with multiple rounds of burnout. What do you think about all this? Like, do you agree with anything I just said? And then, how do people navigate these waters?
I've seen a lot of really super talented people that you and I both know, that we thought this person is going to tear the world apart 2-3 years into it. They're a hollow shell of themselves. And you can see it in the bags under their eyes, the dark circles, and they look really unhealthy. They put on a lot of weight. They've lost their hair. Their skin is looking terrible. What has happened? I don't think oftentimes it's entirely their fault, except for you have to take accountability for your own decisions, right? There was no gun to your head. You made these decisions. What they did was they went to work for super toxic environments for terrible bosses who demanded everything out of them because it was just squeezed more from the creative. And some of these bosses, and we know who they are, I'm not going to mention their names, they know how to manipulate you to make you feel like a horrible creative if you don't go to work on the Sunday. This is not manageable. This is not long-term sustainable. We're talking about people who work 14, 16-hour days, day after day, forever, because they're chasing some amazing project. And it's that carrot that gets dangled above your head to say, oh, this is the one. This is the one that's going to change my life and my career. And I'm here to tell you, this is future self talking to present self. It's not going to change your life. You'll feel proud about it, and then no one will remember, and it'll be that's it.
It's true.
None of that
It's
stuff
true.
matters. What you have to do is you have to look at this whole life as not as a sprint, but a marathon. And for you to be there at mile 22, you have to be there at mile 10, and you have to pass mile 5. And so people who are into running know this. You have to run at a pace that's sustainable. You can't just sprint and be gasping for air, throwing up at mile 1. And so you have to develop healthy habits around eating, around exercise, replenishing your creative cells. That could be a combination of reading, exposing yourself to art. Other kinds of art especially are really important, not just the one that you live in, because it gets really like you start to regurgitate ideas.
The echo chambery, yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's just there's nothing left there. And just to have healthy boundaries, just so that you owe it to your employer and to yourself to give the best 8 hours you can, and stop. And stop. Now, I didn't know this, but some of my employees back in the day, which I should have known better, I'm like, how are they producing so much brilliant work? They brought it home and kept working on it unbeknownst to me, and then came back. It's like, oh, Chris, I just came up with some ideas. I'm like, whoa, this is amazing. You're so good. And they would just keep doing this. Super unhealthy.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
Better. That's on me. That's not on them.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a shared responsibility. I think both people are trying to see, trying to produce the best possible thing that they can, and they're going to, and I think it's okay to do that every now and then, as long as you're communicating it. Like, I know I wasn't supposed to do this, but I got so into this pitch that I worked on it all weekend. I'm sorry, but check it out. And then you're like, cool, let's not make that a habit, but that's great. I love that you got into it, Okay, I'm going to jump over. There's an interesting question here from Nuff, which is just fun to say. Your pal Blair Inns, I didn't know you were friends with Blair Inns. Yeah, Blair Inns. And so anybody listening, Blair Inns wrote the Win Without Pitching Manifesto. Isn't that right? Yeah.
That's right.
And Blair Inns also has a great podcast called Two Bobs. If you are an entrepreneur or a studio owner, you should definitely have that one on your radar. He says, your pal Blair Inns talks about the ultimate risk-reward relationship as partnering with your client. So taking equity and maybe making less cash up front in exchange for potential future gains. This is a little controversial. What's your take on that?
I don't think there's anything controversial about this at all. If you get paid, there's many different forms of getting paid. You can get paid by the hour. You can get paid by the project. You can do value-based pricing, or you can take a percentage of future profits. Now, if all of your clients you built on a model of future profits, it can be very risky. And so, like everything, you have to have a balanced portfolio. So you probably need to have some cash in hand to deal with cash flow issues. But on projects that you think are going to just go through the roof, you probably would want to negotiate some percentage of performance pay. Meaning, if you sell more than X units, I'd like to get a percentage of the profits for whatever time period, 5 years, 10 years, in perpetuity, whatever. And hopefully it hits. Now, I myself have traded my time and my energy and my talent on a couple different companies. They've not panned out, but those are the risks I was willing to take. So I own equity in a couple of dead companies, but that's my problem, not theirs.
Sure.
And you have to be smart about how you're investing and trading your time for this.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to do, I think you said at the top there, you wouldn't want to probably make 100% of your business reliant on those kinds of relationships, because you still need cash flow. You got to pay people, and you got to keep the lights on and all that. I want to say Argo, Jared Ficklin was the first speaker of the day. I want to say that was Argo's early model where they were taking some equity projects. And, I don't know if that worked out or not. I know many other design consultancies have done that or toyed with it. Okay, here's another question that has 4 votes. This is from Justin Weiss. What is the most valuable skill you can work on as a designer besides your craft?
Excellent question. Okay. I think there is a law of diminishing return on getting better at your craft. Now, this might be controversial, this point of view, because you can only get incrementally better, and only a handful of people can actually recognize that you're getting better. So once you achieve some level of expertise in whatever it is that you're doing, animation, illustration, logo design, whatever it is, getting a little bit better at it, it's going to require even more effort. The rest of your energy should be spent on acquiring business skills, especially if you're in the business of selling creativity. Things like marketing, content creation, pricing and negotiation and dealing with sales. If you can work on those things, you're going to do much better for yourself. I personally think that the reason why I'm still here in front of you today, 25 years after starting my company and then starting a second company, is because I recognized that relatively early. I saw that there was a plateau in terms of like, how much better can I get at typography and design? How much better can I get at X and Y? And I realized no matter how good I was getting at that, if I didn't make it easier for clients to find me, I'm not going to get any work. Austin Kleon writes about this in his book, Show Your Work. He says, to be found, you must be findable. Make it easy to find you. This is really important.
That's good. I like that. To be found, you must be findable. Okay, I like this one because you and I had some other questions around just advice, and this one feeds into it. This is from Lads Are Fun. Good handle. Chris, what has been slow grow advice, i.e. advice that took more experience or time to resonate with you, but has really stuck with you now?
One of the things that my professors at Art Center would tell me is you need to be a good communicator. And I'm a first generation immigrant, ESL, English as a second language, an introvert, super shy and awkward. And so when they say things like, you need to learn how to talk to people, my brain is just going on shutdown mode. And I keep telling myself this lie, that if I keep working at my craft and my talent, that the work will speak for itself. Okay. Maybe you've heard this before, Justin, and people will say this. And this is one of the things that I've been thinking about, which is if your work is good enough, you won't have to learn how to market. It will sell itself. That is complete hogwash. That is a lie. There is an exception. If you're so exceptionally talented, if you're that 1% of the 1%, where you're that good and the world just universally recognizes the obvious inevitable truth that you're a pure genius, a gift from God to mere mortals, yeah, you don't have to do anything. For the rest of us working stiffs, and I include myself in this group, you have to actually work really hard at learning how to talk to clients, how to talk to your team, and to be able to describe the work in ways that make it feel like there's a story here, there's an idea, and there's a solution. And if we keep extrapolating from that, you need to be able to tell that story at scale so that it becomes a repeatable thing to more than one person. This is a critical thing. You'll notice that most managers, most owners, most creative directors, their main skill is their ability to connect with other people and to be a lightning rod for ideas.
Yeah. That's great. Somebody asked another question that is similar to one I had on tap for you as well, which is this is from Laura Bunce, sorry. What are your tips for building a community around your passion? And my version of this question is pretty similar. It's like, you need to build an audience, and that usually happens on social media, I suppose. But I like this idea of community. It's a broader term. It's a little more inclusive. So what tips do you have for building community around whatever you're doing?
Okay, it's very simple. You have to find a group of people who share a similar worldview. So they need to be aligned in some way. We all love bodybuilding and we're all vegans. That's a worldview. I get that, right? So we share that. So then now we have a problem. And the problem is they desire transformation of some sort. They want to have meal prep or meal planning. They want to know what the workouts are like and how to maintain good energy and health and not drain all their time. And so if you can solve that problem, a community will form around this. The general problem that people have is they don't identify because they don't want to pick because they're scared. And I get it. It's a difficult thing to do. They want to say, well, I want to serve people who are health conscious, which is everybody and oddly enough, nobody at the same time. So the more narrow that you can make your audience, the easier it is to know them, to feel their pain, to look out for them, to solve their problems, and to empower them with solutions. When you do that, a community will gather, an audience of superfans will gather around you. That's what you do to build a community.
Do you go so far as to work up personas for some of these people? Do you ever do that where you're like, okay, this is an imaginary person, and you get really specific about their background, who they are, and all that? Is that helpful?
It's super helpful. It's a very common thing that user experience and user interface people do. You build a persona because we don't design things for everyone. We design things for someone. And we can take human factors as the kind of the the model to build after. Human Factors talks about ergonomics and building things for certain people, so how people actually use things. So in order to do that, you have to profile people, and you have to look at the demographics and the psychographics and look at their behaviors, their values, their activities, and their interests. And once you get a sense of who they are, talking to them becomes really easy. Coming up with solutions for them becomes really easy, right? There's a dumb film called Robots, which was voiced by Robin Williams, the late Robin Williams. And I think the father or somebody had said, find a need, fill a need. Well, you got to find a need first, right? Do you remember that movie at all?
I do remember that movie. Yeah, it was super bizarre. It had some interesting moments, but that's interesting. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, because you've done with the Futur, I saw the Futur, your second company, I saw it being birthed. I saw as you were kind of forming it, even in its kind of protoplasmic state. I remember you kind of emerging from Blind and wanting your first company, Blind, and wanting to do something else. And then I saw this thing take shape. And then what I saw you develop over time, and I mean this in the best possible way, is like a machine, a content machine. Like, you're so consistent. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be one of the most important things that nobody does, is being consistent and committing to a cadence, whether it's once a month or once a week or once a day, is producing something of value for your audience. I mean, can you talk about that? And what's the reality of that? Because you can't always be making content necessarily. You have to figure out a way to balance those things, right?
Absolutely. And you know this from running your own operation and then helping other organizations get the word out. If you think about the total time in which you're supposed to spend on marketing and PR, you might say 10%. Some more innovative companies might spend 20% or 25% of their resources on marketing and PR. And before everyone throws up in their mouth, I just want you to just look back at the old days. Because you're like, we didn't have to do this pre-social media, did we? I'm like, yes, we did.
Yeah.
You know what we had to do? We had to buy clients lunch and dinner. We would do the dog and pony show. You'd come in, you'd show your portfolio, your reel, and you would take meetings, and you would create direct mail campaigns, and you would send them stuff.
DVDs, remember? We used to send DVDs out to everybody. Hundreds of DVDs. Those were expensive as shit.
They were. And you would take out ads, and you would be published in directories like the Black Book, Alternative Pick, and all these things that probably don't exist anymore. And you would do that. And then you would hope to be featured in some kind of magazine, right? Which would give you some visibility. Now, what's really interesting with the rise of social media is it's democratized the whole process. The gatekeepers are relatively gone. They're still there, but you now have access, direct one-on-one access to some executive creative director at Apple if you wanted to. If you post and you put in the work. So I think what we have to do is we have to reframe the relationship that we have with marketing and content marketing and say that this is not a burden. This is necessary to your creative endeavors. If you approach it like that, then it becomes part of your being and not a separate thing. And so that's what we do. We're constantly communicating with our audience, with our community, so that we're delivering value to them on a long-term basis. And as we do that, our profile rises, our credibility rises. And maybe you didn't believe us in the first year. And I know there are skeptics out there, former friends of mine, like, what the hell is he doing? But year 2, year 3, we're 8 years or 7 years into this.
Yeah.
We're not going away.
Yeah.
Can't get rid of us.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. If anybody wants to learn more about the Futur, it's spelled without the last U and the last E. So it's F-U-T. Right? No, am I getting without the last E?
Just without the E. Yeah, F-U-T-U-R.
Without the last E. So it's the Futur. Yeah, FUTUR.com. We're out of time. I can't believe that time has already blown by. This is awesome talking to you, man. I really appreciate it. Sorry if I didn't get to your questions in the chat. I admit that I indulged myself a little bit, maybe too much. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it.